Well, one of the things about miracles is that it sometimes happen. You think that's true? I do too. I believe in miracles.
Anyways, he brought out this old green piece of moose meat that was under the moss.
Yeah, I believe that.
And it stunk. You know, geez.
Yeah.
Thought of him back there going like,
live in that old shack back there.
You can't not call him Hermit. You know, that many years.
Get out.
He's an amazing character. Like, how he survived that many years is beyond me.
Tired of living and scared of dying, I guess.
I'm Randy Bachman, and I'm going to tell you a fascinating story about a fellow musician who became a legend. His name is Willard, or Kitchener to some. And it wasn't his music that made him famous, it was something quite different. So let's go back in time to reveal the amazing story of Willard.
The springtime of 1940 sees the war in Europe growing in destructiveness and spreading to new fronts. And from the national capital, Ottawa, Prime Minister Mackenzie King warned Germany that this time Canada was going to war not automatically with the mother country, but by the free and united will of all the Canadian people. Banning conscription in the new war, Canada's policy of voluntary service has already brought more recruits than are at present needed.
Actually, most of the volunteers had signed up by the end of 1940, and people had started talking about conscription. Willard did not volunteer and was waiting to see what the politicians in Ottawa would do. There had been riots over this very issue in World War I, and Prime Minister King suggested a compromise. Men conscripted would only serve within Canada. King called for a plebiscite, and in 1942, Bill 80, the National Resources Mobilization Act, became law. Willard was willing to serve in Canada, and when his conscription notice came, he did his duty. The conscripts were called zombies because they really didn't want to be there, but they had to be there because they feared they would be punished. Luckily, nobody faced the firing squad, which was the ultimate sentence. Well, it seems that there was some fine print in Bill 80 that allowed for these zombies to be sent overseas when it was deemed necessary by the Prime Minister. Well, sure enough, D-Day came and the liberation of Europe was underway. The Allied forces were desperate for more men, and Prime Minister King was forced to send Willard and our zombies overseas. And so our story begins on a troop train as it steams closer to its final destination.
Where are we going? Why am I here? I feel like a prisoner. I smell the fear. Don't think it's right to take a life. I want no part of the war machine. I gotta get off this train. Time to break free from these chains. Gotta get off this train. This train ain't bound for glory. Gotta get off this train. No happy ending to the story. The world has gone insane. I don't wanna kill, and I never will. Gonna jump off this ride.
There was lots of hermits, other hermits around the country, but I've never heard of anyone that lived the way this guy. This guy was a real hermit.
It's just hard to imagine how a man, 87 years old, could live in a little box in the woods in a Nova Scotia winter.
Very few people in this world would attempt to live like that.
And I'm sure a lot of other people have said this too. He seemed to be still hiding.
This is Melvin McKay. He's a retired trapper and woodsman and an old-time friend of Willard's.
And you went off to war. And you went overseas to the Second World War?
I remember he They called him up from military service, but he stayed about a week, he ran away. They were about catching him.
Well, there's a lot of people was frightened.
Oh, I should imagine.
You know, a lot of people was frightened.
This is Viola Wall. She and her brother Bud were friends of Willard's.
Was Willard a religious man?
Well, in a sense he was. Yeah, he knew the Bible good.
He didn't believe in killing or,
No,
people.
no. Willard was a very honest man. Yeah.
He didn't like killing people, so he used to say that. I think he was scared himself.
And what did you think about him not going to war and staying behind?
It's crazy you decided that in my place.
Of the 38,500 men conscripted, 6,300 were deserters. The greatest manhunt in Canadian history was on. The quarry were the thousands of soldiers who had deserted to avoid overseas combat. We asked Hector if he had talked to Willard about fleeing the enemy.
No, we brought up the subject different times, and he would say, I just don't want to talk about it, you know. So that was the end of the conversation, yeah.
Hector has known Willard since childhood and was always concerned about his welfare.
What do you think his parents felt about him living his life like that?
I'm not too sure, but his mother knew exactly where he was, and I don't think she disapproved of it.
A good friend of mine, Earl Hingley, told me the story of when he jumped off the train.
Ralph Esau is a retired RCMP officer. He never met Willard, and yet he was inspired to write a song about him.
He jumped the train in 41 as it took the troops to war. 'Twas not his wish that he should die on a far-off foreign shore. He made his choice that fateful night to run away and hide. So he ran by day and he ran by night, looking for a safe abide. The Mounties soon were on his trail, desertion was a crime. He knew if ever he was found, he'd have to do the time. He found his place of solitude in the woods near Gully Lake. That quiet man who meant no harm, whose life was left to make.
Well, at the time when I first encountered him, I was a student minister in Pictou County in Nova Scotia, and I was in the small community called West Branch.
Reverend Dr. Andrew Sterling has a deep empathy for Willard and others like him.
And one night, on a winter's night when there was a performance, a man sat in the shadows at the back of the hall. And there were whispers around, Willard is here, Willard is here. Now at the time I had no idea who they meant by Willard. But after he left and got on his bicycle or walked back into the woods, however he got there, I asked people, who is this Willard of which they speak? And they said, oh, he's the hermit. He's the man who jumped off a train during the war and lives up by Gully Lake. I'd never even heard of Gully Lake, let alone of Willard Kitchener MacDonald. But that was my first hearing of him, and that was about 25 years ago.
Any other thoughts about Willard?
He could live on almost nothing.
Nova Scotia winter could mean 6 feet of snow, probably typically in that area, and temperatures that go to 20 below zero, 30 below zero, and without heat, without adequate clothing. I mean, it's just hard to believe that anybody could survive.
Bill Casey, a member of federal parliament, has never met Willard, but has heard many fantastic stories about him.
But here, this man stayed there with rubber boots in basically a box and survived through that. And it's just, it defies common sense that he could make it.
I often wondered that. I have not, because we've had winters that was snow, a lot of snow, and he would be in there, and I often asked Chester, how do you suppose he'll make it this winter, especially as he started to age?
Doreen and Chester Cook live in Economy, Nova Scotia, and were old-time friends of Willard's. They both like to hunt. Doreen has killed 5 bears.
He had, like I say, he had snowshoes and skis. And surprisingly, he was in good shape.
But before that, Chester, he never came. Before that, like he wasn't coming out to the stores and people wasn't going in. How did he get through those winters?
I think there's very few human beings that could go back in the woods, as Kitchener did, and survive. And I would think very few. I mean, that in itself is a feat.
Bill Langille is a member of the Provincial Legislative Assembly. He shares his father's story of meeting Willard for the first time.
And I was just a young lad then, but I do recall that the time in about 1954, 1955, the day I was out hunting in Gully Lake. So we started following this little path. We came to this small clearing, and here was this little cabin. So I believe that there was actually a deer hanging at that time. And he said for some reason he just turned around to his right, and here's this fellow standing beside him, looking at him. So it gave him quite a start. In fact, I think it really startled him. Kitchener would still be scared that the authorities were going to come and take him away because of him jumping the troop chain.
And I know, you know, like he was always fearful of people in uniform, like a Mountie. I'm sure that he would run for miles, or anybody had a uniform on, he was scared of them.
What it must be like, you know, we heard that it wasn't a camp in the woods, it was like more or less a hut underneath the ground. So we just couldn't imagine.
Being a nurse, how do you think he survived all those years?
He must have been one tough bugger, I tell you.
Lisa Hartland is a nurse. She used to live in Earltown, and it was she and her girlfriend that used to sit down and watch Willard bicycle into town.
But like you say, he lived off the land, so he must have been some tough and healthy, you know. How could you not be?
But you know, like back where his log hut was, he didn't have an outhouse. And to this day, I have yet, and we've been in there a lot of times, to find anything where he went.
People think of Gully Lake as a little lake, Gully Lake, but actually Gully Lake encompasses a huge area, you know, 4,000 acres. We can have beautiful weather in the summertime and a very harsh winter. We're living up in the Cobequid Mountains, and we do get a lot of snowfall.
And I mean, that was the year there was 4 feet of snow that was on the ground, right to the, you know, the top of the veranda right there. Without what drifted was about 12 feet. So probably buried him right there. And he's what he said. He said, "Hell without a fire on." I went, yeah. I just kind of like, yeah.
One fall, they went in to get ready to go hunting, and they didn't use it as like a summer home or a cottage. It was just a deer hunting camp. It had to be back in the 50s. And they went in, and Willard was living there. Like, he just really doesn't keep things clean at all. Just terrible. So they just booted him out, and he was kind of reluctant to go, but he said, yes, you have to go, we're here to hunt. And then he moved over towards the lake and built that log cabin.
Music, it seems to do something to a person. I don't know exactly what it is. It makes you feel good.
Rosin up the bow.
Where did you get the rosin at? You get that in Earltown, can you?
Yeah. Yeah, I get there. You smoke cigarettes, do you?
Yeah. Want one?
No. I was just wondering, I got some cigarettes, but I can't smoke it, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You want a package of it, you can have it.
Yeah, maybe a little package of it and try it anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't like it either.
Well, I mean, I can't smoke any cigarettes.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I do, but
Allergic to it, or?
No, I can't seem to get a smoke out of it. I smoke a pipe.
Music, I would say, was one of his only entertainments that he had inside there, except the wildlife that was around him. Crows and blue jays.
David Buckler is an accomplished violinist, and he enjoyed playing music with Willard. Willard inherited his father's love of music. He had his own kind of style, not as refined as his father, yet nevertheless he could play well.
He was one of the best violin players. He could play anything, he could guitar, he could make it
So when you're mad, Dad.
The guitar you see now was one that Willard made. Here you see him in his later years with the same passion, if not the skill.
And so whenever I was there, he would pull the guitar down and we would have a little session. He would play, and it was interesting the way he played.
John Adset is a professor at the Nova Scotia Agricultural College. He enjoyed playing guitar and talking about religion with Willard.
And then I would play, and I would sing some well-known songs like Amazing Grace. And so he was very complimentary, and he just asked me if he could take guitar lessons from me. And then he said he'd like to come and stay at my place. So I wasn't really sure if he really wanted to come and stay at my place or not, so we never really followed up on that.
His music, that's what seemed like his love was. And he had some sort of belief that some of these other performers had stolen his music. And he didn't really care for that.
He said he used to think that the songs on the radio, they were stolen. And he'd say, I don't know how they're getting them, but they're stealing my songs. So it makes you wonder if he was...
Here we are at North Colchester High. We're here to visit 4 students who have done projects on the Hermit of Gully Lake. One of them has even met Willard in person.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Foote, and I'm from Tatamgush Mountain.
Hi, I'm Duncan Forbes, and I'm from Denmark.
Hi, I'm Hannah McNutt. I'm from Middleton.
Hi, I'm John Creighton, and I'm from Tatamgush.
How many of you have heard of the Hermit of Gully Lake? Okay, so would you say that's the consensus around most of the high school students here? Most of them have heard of the Hermit of Gully Lake?
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
How many have actually met the Hermit of Gully Lake? Okay, John?
Well, it was just like a box wooden cabin, and it was pitch black inside, and the only thing he had in there was his guitar. I was just like seeing this guy live back in the middle of the woods, and he was like really dirty, but he was really nice. We mostly just talked to my dad and the guy who brought us there, but he said hi and all that.
And he'd be coming up the road, and I remember we were scared to death because he was so odd, you know, and you heard the stories that he lived way in the woods and ate squirrels, and we just thought he was crazy, but we were only 10 too.
It was once said to Willard that he wasn't contributing toward society. His reply was, well, I'm not taking much away either.
It was just the way he lived, and there's apparently, I've heard of stories of other hermits living in other parts of the province, but I've never heard of anybody live the way this fella did.
We asked Frank White, a shop teacher and friend, to describe Willard's camp to us.
The cabin that he built was approximately 6 by 8, was his whole living. That was living room, kitchen, everything in there. His stove was in very poor condition, even when I went out there in the late 70s.
Yeah, that old stove seen its better days, didn't it?
Oh yeah, it's just a tin.
Yeah. Well, kept you warm for a lot of years.
And after watching the stove deteriorate and him patching it up and so on, we built him a fairly good little stove, and it was a miniature scale of a production model I had seen somewhere or that somebody had.
He then got his buddies to deliver it on their ATVs.
That's like 7
Frank and his students enjoyed making the stove for Willard.
I'll have to get you to stand beside it there, Kester. I'll get a picture of you with your new stove.
Close to the same size, isn't it?
Yeah, real heavy stuff. That'll hold the heat for.
Ooh, that'll hold a lot of heat.
When you first put it in, you may want to stay with it for a day or so till you see how it's going to burn. You don't want to get it burning too fast, like.
She'll throw heat.
Yeah, I suppose.
And we took that out to him, but he was leery of people, and even though I'd known him for quite a few years, he still didn't have full trust in me. When the day we took the stove out, we took an extra pipe with him to hook so we had the right size of pipe to put it up and stuff, but he didn't want us to put the pipe in, or didn't want us to put the stove in. And the stove sat out there for a number of years, and finally I went out one winter and the stove was in. Somebody had helped them, or I assume somebody helped them put it in anyway.
There you go.
How do you think he handled 60 years in the woods?
Oh, that had to be a long 60 years. Like, I don't know. A couple hours is enough for me. Like, I don't know how you can do 60 years. Even in the winter time when it gets, it's dark at 7:30 in the morning and it's dark again at 4:30. The daylight, even inside of the cabin, there was just the one little window in it. Like, to me, it would be very difficult to even read in there in the wintertime. There wouldn't be much light. So it would have to be a long, long 60 years.
And so there were many stories about Willard, and those stories revealed a man of immense physical strength, of great intelligence, of conviction, a man who was able to withstand things that hardly any other living creature could withstand. And so naturally, somebody who lives like that is going to be of great interest and fascination.
He was a smart man. He was a well-read man. I could tell by the books. He liked a variety of books, classics.
Marilyn McWaugh was a librarian that used to bring books to Willard.
Little mystery. Once in a while, he liked some science fiction and westerns and ghost stories. He liked ghost stories a lot. So I used to pick up a list of books that he wanted. At the store, he'd leave them written on a little piece of paper for me. And I couldn't give him the books off her shelf because where he lived, they wouldn't be fit for other patrons to read. So I tried to find through our discarded shelf. And if I couldn't find what he wanted, I would go to a used bookstore or find from friends or something the books that he wanted and take them to them the next time he went back.
I don't remember the first time I met him, but I've seen him a pile of times in my lifetime, and we were back and forth with him quite a bit.
Jim Bezanson is a friend of Willard's. He spent a lot of time with him, and here are some of his stories.
I was hunting up at Staley Campbell's up here, and I went in, and there was a great big hemlock tree, and there was about 4 inches of snow, but there was no tracks in, but there was tracks out in the morning. So you must have stayed underneath that hemlock tree all night. Amazing. I come onto this track, and I went back a little ways to see where it came from, and that's where it came from, underneath this hemlock tree. I couldn't believe that a man could have stayed there all night. It was cold too. I got his snowshoes. I found his snowshoes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you use them all the time or in the winter?
No, I put them to rest.
You did?
I have a camp, and I put them in the camp,
Jim recounts his first meal with Willard.
It was, I guess, molasses and hard bread and black tea, and it was supposed to be porcupine, but I don't think it was. I think it was a roasted deer or whatever. It was good too, because I was in there hunting, and I was walking out, and it was a wet, cold night in the fall, and it hit the spot. It wasn't McDonald's, so it wasn't the same as McDonald's. Yeah, but it was good. It tasted all right.
So every few months I would go in and visit him, usually in connection with some work that I was doing either in Pictou County or out in Earltown or towards Tatamagousta Shore. And from time to time would take books, food items, non-perishable food.
Don Cameron is a forester with the Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources. He was fascinated and inspired by how Willard lived.
Supplies that might be of use to him, boots or winter clothing or hats, and whatever it was, you would bring it to him, and he would accept it grudgingly. He would say something like, "Oh, I didn't really need that," or "You didn't need to do that," or he would be surprised that you would be bringing him things. He was appreciative, but yet you knew that he didn't need much. His life was simple, his world was simple.
and we got him playing on the violin, and so I know a few tunes myself, and so my gosh, when he got playing. The awful groans and moans was coming out of this violin. It was terrible, and my friend was on the ground laughing, and I said to him, "This old bugger can't play a violin." And then all of a sudden he switched over and he started playing the old man, the old woman, which I recognized, and he was doing quite well at it.
I wonder why that happened.
Well, he used to play, he said that they were, the ghosts and the
hoodoos.
Yeah, the hoodoos. He used to say that's what was sending him messages and to play of pieces that other people didn't recognize.
First time I heard of the Hermit of Gully Lake was when I was elected first in 1988. And I heard these stories of a man living in the woods. I mean, it defied common sense. I didn't believe it could be true. But the stories kept coming. I followed up on it, and sure enough, there was a man living there year-round.
And it was really interesting because you couldn't help but think, here's this gentleman who's lived out here for many decades in an incredibly tough life on his own with no real people to live with, no communication with anyone else, the tough physical life that he had to withstand living where he did.
A big part of my job is working with seniors, and it's just hard to imagine how a man, 87 years old, could live in a little box in the woods in a Nova Scotia winter.
The climate, the conditions, and not having any of the modern conveniences. And yet he was appreciative for every little thing that you would bring, and there was never anything fancy. So that was a real learning experience and very humbling.
And I didn't believe it. I thought it was just a story. I thought it was like a pirate story or something, because I just didn't believe it. I didn't think anybody could survive.
I always felt very good for going to visit him, not for bringing him things, but just for the experience to talk to him, to learn from him, and just it's just so interesting.
Because there's an awful lot of information and just a lot of human interest in that man's brain that I would have liked to heard. You know, I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to talk to my grandmothers as an example. And this is another person that obviously had a really interesting story to tell, and we missed it, and it's gone.
Well, we'll try it, see if it works.
Yeah.
A spin-off to that was that my instantaneous thought after that first experience is that I would love to take my family here. I would love for my children, my wife, to meet him.
How do you think he ever survived all those years?
I think he had some tough ones, but he picked a good spot. You know, there was trout and eels in the lake, and there was moose and deer all around him, and he done some trapping. He got some fur. He sold a bit of fur years ago. He made a few axe handles, and they were pretty crude sometimes. I was in there once, the lady from Truro, and she bought an axe handle from him and gave him a very good price for it, and I'm sure it made his day. Yes, he was happy. Yeah. On one occasion, we went down to the store with him. He just got a little bag of flour. Now, in his cabin, he'd have an old bucket of sourdough, you know. And you know what he'd do with the flour? He added that to the sourdough. And how he cooked that on his stove, I don't know. If he put it on top of the stove, I suppose it'd be hardtack. And if he made it in the hubcap, fit right into the top of his stove, he had to have a hole cut in the top of the stove that Frankie had made for him, and the hubcap fit right into that. And that was ideal for his cooking his food, yeah.
Think of the lake years ago, filled full of food, filled full of eels and trout and mushrooms in the woods and all kinds of stuff he knew to get, right?
Dale Monroe and Glenn McMeekin share their story of the hermit.
Plus his mother went in there too and visited him once a month or so, and you know, she was bringing stuff.
All right.
She was bringing stuff in, yeah. You know, plus the toothaches. Wonder how he pulled his teeth. He had none. He didn't have very many, so he must have pulled them, right?
I guess.
You know, when he put it in.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Every time we were together and done anything, he'd always give you the big speech. And I always had pretty good luck the next day if I was hunting or anything. I always seemed to have good luck after talking to him. I don't know how it could be, but I shot more deer after talking to him than any other time.
What trip was he taking? Yeah, tell us about that story.
Oh, the trip he went to the moon.
Yeah.
He went down and he got 4 bottles of wine, and I said, "Where you going, Willard?" He said, "I'm going to head to the moon." And he said, "I'm going to save 2 bottles for tomorrow." I said, "What for?" He said, "I'll need 2 bottles to come back on." So I guess he must be going to have quite a trip. Another time I took him in, too, in the fall. He was drinking quite a bit that day too. He leaned over in the car and he said, "You know," he said, "I'm starving for love." That's what he said to me. And I said, "Well," I said, "I can't do much for you there, Willard."
Willard's parents, Howard and Jessie, first fell in love in Nova Scotia. Well, a while later, on August 13, 1916, Willard Kitchener MacDonald was born in the town of Somerville, Massachusetts. He was the eldest of 3 children. It was in these tough times while living in Somerville that Willard's parents became missionaries for the new church, the Unity School of Christianity. The MacDonalds returned to Canada as missionaries to bring people to God. And it was said that they moved around the Maritimes from Dieppe, New Brunswick, to the Tantramar Marshes near Amherst, Nova Scotia, eventually settling down in a 1.5-story house on Halliburton Road, just outside Pictou, Nova Scotia.
Well, old Howard was, like I say, he was a musical man. He played violin. At his home in Pictou, there they did a little shingle down at the road. I think it was Violin Maker or something it was on it. Very recently, I seen a violin with Howard MacDonald's name in it. Yeah, where he had possibly made it, you know. And everybody called him Fiddlefoot.
This is Ruth Smith and her son David. They were friends of Willard and his family. She has fond memories of those times.
Was he close to his mother?
Yes, he used to go back to Pictou quite a bit on the bicycle. We would meet him when we were kids going to school. He'd be going back to Pictou with the bicycle. Even on icy roads, he'd get on the bike and go to Pictou.
Always strong, right?
Always. Yes, and she always did go back to see Willard. As long as she could walk, she went back to see Willard.
Well, he was a very, very nice boy, and he's a very honest boy too. And Dad and Mom thought an awful pile of him. And he had a car one time too before. He used to drive a car. I don't know if it was his father's or whose.
It was around the same time in the late 1930s when Willard met Edna Marshall. Willard was working at the McIntosh Lake sawmill at the time.
No, she used to work with her in her uncle's mill. That's where Edna used to work. The girls used to work in their mill.
Edna became pregnant, and on September 22, 1939, she gave birth to a boy, Leroy Marshall, and then promptly handed her son over to her mother, Margaret, to raise.
On the key of G. He had a son, and his name's Leroy Marshall, and I was playing for a dance one time in Divert, and this fella came up to me and complimented me on the music, playing the fiddle. And we got talking, and I asked him what his name was, and he told me Leroy Marshall. And he said, "You may have heard of my father, Kitchener MacDonald, Willard MacDonald, I believe he's. And said yes, we had been in to see him earlier. And I'd already met Kitchener, but this was Kitchener's son. He's very much like Kitchener in a lot of ways. He's a fairly tall, slim man physically, very active. He's musical. Like you inherit certain things like that, you don't realize you have them, but somebody else watching you or looking at you can observe that you have the same walking characteristics as your father. And Leroy does remind me of that a little bit.
Leroy left school to work in the woods, which he's done for more than 50 years now. Leroy, speaking about his father, was quoted to have said, "He was his own prisoner and was the only one that had the key."
But what kept him away is hard to know and hard to define. It might have been fear, it might have been this sense that he didn't want the world crashing in on him and that he felt more secure by being on his own. But in many ways, like many hermits, Willard Kitchener MacDonald was a contradiction. The other side is that Willard is somebody who came to realize how he was dependent on other people, how other people were a source of enjoyment for him. And so you could only live in that physical isolation for so long, but the human need to live in community with others was also very strong in Willard as well.
You knew him in your younger years, did you?
Well, I've seen him around, you know.
Right.
People really didn't get to know, he didn't befriend Kitchener. I think there was people he trusted, but I don't know whether you call it friends or not.
You knew him from back in Earltown area?
Yeah. He just wouldn't work.
Right, you worked in the woods with him, did you?
I took him to the woods as a partner. I just felt he's too down. He wouldn't work it hard. I tried. He's a lumberman. He had a big bunch of lumber to sell. A load that came up after. You know what the wages were at that time? 10 cents an hour.
My brother and another guy followed the place where he came in. He had a 50-pound bag of potatoes on his back, and there was snow on the ground, a skiff of snow. And he walked for about, I don't know, 2 miles. He never let that bag of potatoes down until he got to, because you could have seen it in the snow if he had set it down.
When I first met Willard, well, he was sitting in this corner, actually, of the room, playing the guitar. And he was singing Sweet Betsy from Pike. That was my first meeting with Willard.
How old was he?
He would have been in his 20s then.
And how about you, David? When's the first time you met him?
Oh, I met him that I can remember of, probably 40 years ago, at least.
David first met Willard when he was 3 days old. As David grew up, Willard gave him advice on hunting and fishing.
At least you could skip school and have some place to go.
For sure. Yeah. Now that you know, Mom. and what kind of things would you do when you were there?
I'll tell some stories, and he'd get the fiddle out, play the fiddle for a while, and then he'd put it away and get the guitar out and play it.
Did you ever play with them?
No, I don't play no instrument myself.
See, he used to be up through these woods too, and my Uncle Rod was quite a trapper himself. He tracked bear all through here. And Willard come out of the woods there, and he goes, "You want to buy the secret of snare and bear?" And Roddy'd already had a couple bear that fall, right?
Sure.
And he said, "No, I think I'll pass on that one." Well, he want $5 for it.
Yeah, sure.
He's quite a
way to make a little money.
Oh, he wasn't stupid.
Yeah, I guess he wasn't. No, sir. No way.
Why do you think Willard liked Gully Lake so much?
He liked to be alone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had too many visitors there.
So the tourists comes here, you know, and you don't know them, so.
Yeah.
that's Willard's handwriting?
That's Willard's handwriting right there, yep. It says, Tobacco Company, Quebec. Dear sir, please send me $20 off your fine, good tobacco.
Yeah, you get a brandy smoke out of that.
Huh?
You get good smoke out of that. Good.
Yeah, it ain't too bad.
Oh, yeah.
Like the old fellow says, I shouldn't be smoking this one than the next.
Yeah. Yeah. I never heard that before. No, that's all right. Yeah.
I think a lot of it was curiosity. Once the word spread out that he was out there by himself and the way he lived, he had a lot of company, you know, the last number of years, especially on weekends. If you'd go out there, there'd be a lot of people there, you know.
Do you think he liked having people coming back to visit with him?
No, he wasn't fussy with anybody. He was kind of his own family.
Yeah, it's very peculiar. It was funny Willard. Oh, yeah.
You know, I never seen him shake hands with anybody.
Like yourselves? Like shaking hands, like interlocking fingers?
Oh, every time we'd go out, we'd give him the handshake like that.
Oh, okay.
That was the old Willard MacDonald handshake, yes, sure.
That was like a friendship to him.
That's a famous handshake today among the boys that know him. Yeah.
Is it?
That's the Willard MacDonald handshake.
Well, I just figured out a new way. I apologize for when I came in, I didn't shake your hand.
I think people made him happy. Good people, anyway, yeah.
What kind of people didn't he like?
If you're too nosy,
Asked too many questions.
ask too many questions, yeah. If you didn't answer, don't ask another question. Shift gears, yeah. Go another direction, yeah.
Lloyd Bogle first befriended Willard in the 70s. It was Lloyd who introduced him to the outside world. As snowmobiles started becoming popular, Willard's shack was a lot more accessible. Willard would be amused by some of the questions people asked. They were curious about the things hanging from the ceiling.
One thing that was very outstanding inside were the little small eels hanging from the ceiling in the far corner of the shack. They're just little short eels about so long. And I think he got those out of the brook that drained out of Gully Lake.
Deer? Porcupine? Rabbit?
I know he ate the rabbit, and I know he ate muskrat, yeah.
And eels?
Eels, fish, yeah.
Oh, you said you tried eels. What did it taste like?
I didn't like them. I don't like eels, period. Yeah. But they would dry, he would dry them and they'd last a long time. Yeah.
I heard that he get eels and like in the winter, he put them on his ceiling. I guess that's what the Big Ma ate, so he could have done it too.
Like, I know he ate eels, like he ate rice, like almost like,
Well, they're not really eels. They told everyone they're eels, but it's actually moose meat dry.
oh, it's moose meat.
That's what it is.
Is that true?
Really?
Oh, so you did?
Oh, yeah.
So they're not eels?
They're not really eels, no.
I never heard that before. No, that's all right.
Okay, so how did he cut a slice? Like I saw pictures.
That's why you just cut it up, eh? When you took it off the bone, you deboned it all.
So he's been fooling everybody all these years because I thought it was all eels that were we're told. No?
That's hilarious.
No, that was moose meat.
Yeah. No, he's traveled around these woods for a while, and you've run across Willard a time or two.
Oh, yeah, quite a few times.
Any interesting stories?
Yeah, the time Dougie and I went in there one day, and of course we had some food stuff for him, and some wine for the end of the meal.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff like that, and Willard took the bottle down and poured a cap full of wine, right, and threw it out the step, right?
Oh, yeah.
To the spirits of God, he said.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, to the spirits of God, eh? And I just looked at him, and he took another cap full, and he drank it right down, eh? Then handed the bottle to me.
Right on.
That's all. I was obligated to have a little drink, you know, with him.
Right on.
So I did, right? You know, I had a little story out there where he goes, you drank after Willard? I mean,
well,
you know, he was I did it because he was a legend.
Hey, Glenn, when's the first time you met Willard?
Oh, my jumps. 25 years ago, probably.
And what happened?
I was going down the brook fishing down there in the headwaters of the Salmon River, actually, and I come up with the river, and he was standing there, and he asked me if, I hardly knew the guy then. I knew him some, but I don't know a lot, and he said, will you drive me to town? I said, yeah, I'll drive you down. What do you want to get in town, Willard? And he said, got to get a compass. He said, I lost my compass. Pretty hard to get around without a compass here. Oh, yeah. That's what he said. And I went, well, I got one right here in my vest. I got one at home, and I got one in my vest. So you can have this one right here. And so he reached in his pocket, and he pulled out a old tobacco bag, and he had all this fine, like gold dust in it, but it was like a bronze along the Gully Lake Road, He had it full of that, and he had these rocks in there, and he'd give me 2 rocks. He refused. I had to take a couple of rocks, right? Like just to make him feel like, you know. Yeah. And so I did, that was the gift, that was the gift.
We feel better as human beings when we care for other human beings. And in a sense, it redefines the way that we look at the world. Being compassionate to somebody else has the effect of making our lives richer and better. In a sense, by taking care of Willard and going to see Willard and help Willard, people's lives were enriched by helping somebody and by having received, in a sense, the love of Willard back to them.
Is that all? That's all it was, yeah.
You got him up pretty quick.
Yeah, you did, didn't you?
I thought it used to take about pretty nearly half an hour.
Is that right?
I've heard over the years of people going to extraordinary lengths to connect with Willard and to care for him. People who, for example, on a Sunday afternoon after church, if they hadn't heard about him for 3 or 4 weeks, would go out to make sure that Willard was all right.
You're wasting that film now.
Where's that
Charged up pretty good?
Where's that piece of trash at there?
Right here, keep coming.
Oh, there we go.
Look at a good machine.
The day I had Dr. Shee back there, he gave him a little test. Say you had $1, and you bought 2 chocolate bars of 25 cents, how much you had left. So he done quite a bit of figuring, and he wasn't exactly right. Then he said to the doctor, he said, I haven't done arithmetic for a long, long time. So Dr. Shee asked him what education he had. He said, maybe grade 8. He wasn't sure. Yeah. So he got him to write a sentence. What do you want me to write? He said, you write anything you want to write. So he wrote down, this old world is one contrary place.
Wow.
That's what he wrote.
He had his birth certificate on his possession when he...
I gave it to him. I gave it to him.
How did you get the birth certificate?
Rode up to Boston for it.
I was concerned about him not having any fixed monetary income or reliability factors that he could count on. We tried to convince him that he would be entitled to the old age pension and or welfare. So there was those 2 options that was available to him, I felt. But he was skeptical on it.
He needed the money. He always told you that. Like we were talking about it, he'd need money, and then when they tell him about the pension and this, end of the subject again.
It was Lloyd Bogle, Dave Buckler, and Emily Lane that were trying to get Willard his old age pension. Emily Lane is retired from the Colchester County Social Services.
And I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what I knew of Kitchener MacDonald. My first introduction to the life of Willard Kitchener MacDonald was in August 1995. A statement had been received for payment from the general store in Earltown for groceries. I questioned the secretary, Sally Higgins. Apparently, several people had taken the old age security application into Mr. MacDonald. One item of good fortune for me was Kitchener's original birth certificate was on his file. From whence it came, no one seemed to know. Kitchener was born in Massachusetts August 13th, 1916, to Canadian-born parents.
I don't regret going back, not once. No, not once. And the people I took back, oh, you take me back there and I'll get him to sign the pension. He tried all day. We was there till that night to dark.
He went to quite a bit of work to get it for you too, Kitchener.
What's that fine print stuff?
Yeah. Did you explain it to him?
Yeah, I have to sign it as a witness. And it's yours.
You just get him till you think back.
Kitchener thought for a moment, then looked at me with a little grin and said, "Dearie, I'll have to think about it."
And then he had a world's money order there. He was left some money. It was 9 or 10 years old when I seen it, and it was still good.
Was it quite a bit of money?
Not quite $1,000. I made several trips over to take him to the bank to get that cash, but he never got it cashed.
I was quite determined to get the old age security in GIS, so I thought there must be another way to conquer this problem for Kitchener.
Because he didn't want to sign.
He was not going to sign his name. Forget it.
You can never remember him signing his name, can you?
No.
I asked the CEO of the municipality if I could sign on behalf of Kitchener. Good thought, he said, but you'll have to consult with our lawyer first. I did, and he gave me the go-ahead, and so set the wheels in motion. Wheels that traveled a long road before his first old age security check was received, directly to Colchester County Social Services.
The money was in the trust. He could get whatever he wanted, but he would never call.
How much money do you think he would have had now?
When he got the pension there, it was over $800 a month. But when they got the pension, they sent him a check of $100 a month, and he never cashed those.
At this time, and it was long overdue, that Kitchener must have more comfortable and healthy living conditions. I spent hours upon hours looking at possibilities for suitable housing for Kitchener. Small houses for rent, small houses for sale, but nothing suitable. So the only option left was to have a small cabin built for Kitchener, and this was discussed with him. He wanted it in a wooded area and near water, not handy roads and traffic. The only property available that met Kitchener's wishes was Crown land, another obstacle in our way.
But he was not going to sign his name on nothing. Nothing.
Kitchener himself knew what he would like to have, the modern-day open concept, and with a loft. So the cabin was built, a kitchen and dining room in the front, and a lounge at the back.
And did they use that pension money to build that house?
Yep.
They did. And he agreed to that? He didn't. But that was his money.
The cabin was completely furnished, single bed with warm blankets in the loft, table and chairs, Chesterfield and chair.
That place cost over $20,000 to build.
Maybe people really didn't know him well enough to know he didn't want to go into the new place.
I know he didn't. He didn't want to go there.
Unfortunately, the first stove was stolen the first night. Another one was purchased in its place, and Lloyd Gogo was hired to guard the cabin for a few nights.
Said they's going to move him out in the morning and for me to stay here, and I said, I don't think you'll be here with him. He said, I'll have him here tomorrow. He said he'd come tomorrow. So we went back tomorrow, and he was nowhere in sight.
Set it to him a little bit, is it?
Ironically, Willard had no desire to leave his humble abode on Gully Lake.
Willard would never want a place like that.
What do you think would have been better for him?
A little log cabin back at the lake. Just a little wee place, one room, and just something like what he had just something like you had here in this picture.
Well, the fire apparently started in the flue of his shanty. It's good to realize that the fireplace that he had, the old stove that he had, was a potbelly stove set in the middle of the shanty, and the smoke would come out, and most of the smoke would come out in the actual building itself. So it was completely black, covered with soot, the buildup of creosote and such. When you think about what this structure was built out of, the amount of dry rot in the wood, and just incredibly tinder dry, it would have burned in no time. So he was very lucky to get out with his life. And of course, he lost all of his books, his magazines, everything that he held dear to him, his guitar, which meant so much to him. So it hurt him greatly to lose his home, to lose his few possessions that he had.
Not only did he lose his home, but he lost his front and backyard too, all 40 hectares of it.
Are you surprised it didn't burn down sooner than that?
I really am, yeah. I really, really am. Because that contraption he had for a stove before weren't much.
He looked pretty bad after the fire. I seen him a few days later. He just more or less shook his head. He couldn't. He told me, he said, "What do you think of the fire, Willard?" He said, "I don't know." He said, I thought I was in hell, but I guess it was pretty warm. And I guess he lost it with everything. Amazing, isn't it? No one ever took a collection up for him. No one ever, you know what I mean? Like most people, they get burnt out, they help, you know. People didn't even ask if he was still living, you know. They just, Willard was Willard, eh?
After the fire, he was distraught and homeless. He would never be the same. It was said that Willard kept a diary of his life and wanted to have it published. If this were true, it would have unraveled the many mysteries still unknown about him. Now, Willard had no choice but to reluctantly move into the cabin that was built for him. The publicity of the fire drew public concern about his health and welfare.
He was quite, I think, upset with the fact that there was some sort of mild coercion in getting him to try to go to hospital.
Dr. Jerry Farrell treats terminally ill patients as the director of palliative medicine in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia.
I'm sure people had good intentions, but it wasn't for Willard. I said I would go in to see him, but I felt Willard, I would not in any way try to persuade him to leave there if he didn't want to. It surprised me to see Willard how he had lost the spark that I saw in his eyes on the previous visit, which I know was some time before, but he looked to me at that time that he had lost significant weight and was looking quite ill.
One group wanted to take him out of the woods and put him in a nursing home. This panicked Willard. No one was taking him anywhere. He was bound and determined to stay at Gully Lake, his home of 60 years.
Did they come to you first when he went missing?
They came because they accused us of taking him and hiding him.
Oh.
Did they really?
Are you
Oh,
serious?
yes. Oh, yes. Oh, the cop was sitting in this chair, and he asked Davy, and I almost laughed in his face. The way he expressed it, I shouldn't have been ignorant and laughed, but I had kind of a smile on. Davy was sitting there, and he said, "When did you first set eyes on Willard?" You didn't ask him when he first knew him. The question was, when you... And I looked at Davy, Davy says, "I don't remember," and I was thinking to myself, no, hardly. You were only 3 days old.
That's funny.
He was more scared to go to the hospital, probably because he'd think that they'd put him in a home for old people, and he didn't want to do that.
Willard was always sort of skeptical of mainline medicine and people related to the medical culture, I think.
The way I see it is, you know, if everybody got killed with kindness in this world, it'd be a pretty good world, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
This guy is kind of sad, you know. Poor old fella, you know, like I still think to this day, this minute, if they hadn't been too aggressive towards him, that he'd still been there.
And you said, I think you said earlier in January, you saw his tracks in
January?
January?
Oh yeah, he's around the 1st of January I seen his tracks there. I had a pretty good idea he was traveling down that Gully Lake Brook, but I yet never run into him.
Well, he seemed to be, and I'm sure a lot of other people have said this too, he seemed to be still hiding from the world at large, and he seemed to still feel bad about something because God's been so kind to us. I mean, he's made all these wonderful things like lakes and birds and trees that we can enjoy, and he just wants us to accept that forgiveness. And everyone that does, whether it's early in life or midlife or the last thing, I know that they'll be at peace after they die.
And I phoned Lloyd Bogle to see what Lloyd knew, and he feared the worst.
So you believe he...
I believe he died in that great big storm in February, or when did that come, January?
The end of January, I believe.
January that year?
On June 27, 2004, they found the remains of Willard's body. A birth certificate and other items found confirmed Willard's identity. An autopsy was performed and his death was due to exposure, hypothermia, and his age, combined with illness. Coincidentally, Leroy's mother, Edna Marshall, had died 4 days earlier and had been buried the day before Willard's body was found.
And I said Willard is where he wants to be, and I totally respected his wish to be in a natural environment, and I feel that, you know, he died like he wanted to die.
Mr. Sterling was the minister. He was very nice. But one thing he did emphasize, there was a guy got killed in the Air Force there. He said he was to that funeral a few days beforehand, and they had the airplanes flying over now for Willard. He said, what would we have to fly over? He said, Canada geese going to the lake. And he said, they always said, poor Willard. He said, Willard was really not a poor man because he knew more than all the rest of us put together.
Pastor Neil Sterling from Pictou County commented about an article that was written in the Globe and Mail called Poor Old Willard. Some people felt he was out there by himself and that he died alone, but that is not true. He had a need for solitude and the chorus of the birds, for the sunrises and sunsets over Gully Lake, for the blanket of autumn leaves outside his home, for the wind through the trees and the crunch of the snow beneath his feet. Don't feel sorry for Willard. He died where he wanted to die. I'm not sure he wasn't richer in his personal life than many of us. Willard never had his computer crash. He never maxed out his Visa card. He never got upset about health care. He never got pulled over for speeding. He didn't own a Palm Pilot that told him he had to be somewhere at a certain time. Poor old Willard? I don't think so.
And the night before his memorial service, I was very much missing him, very much in tune with, you know, the fact of how he had died and that we hadn't been around to talk to him or anything. And so as I wrote that song, it was much, you know, there was a lot of feeling in my heart. And there is again today, sitting here in this place.
Oh, we called him the Hermit of Gully Lake, but he was princely man in his own right. We called him the Hermit of Gully Lake. He was princely man in his own right.
It was a nice funeral. It wasn't an overly big amount of people there.
Yeah.
Just right.
Oh yeah, it was pretty near brought tears to my eyes in different spots. Like, you know, the minister says he didn't have an SUV, and he didn't have this and that, but he lived back all them years.
That's
and,
right.
And survived it. And we had this and we had that, and he never. And it didn't matter. He didn't need that stuff.
He
right?
worded that service really good.
Yeah, he didn't need that stuff.
That was
nothing to him, right?
Well, it was almost like it was planned.
Yeah.
Him and nature had together, right?
Sure. Oh, definitely.
Nobody was
yeah.
going to
Just
find
like your
him.
song, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly,
like,
that's
you know,
yeah. It fits it perfect. It fits
the
it to a
night
T,
he left.
Yeah.
Winter come in and buried him.
Yeah.
Anyways, I come home and the song just went right to the paper. It's almost like Willard wrote it himself. It goes like this. It was a cold December day. Old Willard slipped away back to the bush where he belonged.
I mean, this human being is obviously a rarity in the world. I mean, there can't be many others, if any others, that you can compare in any way. The joie de vivre that he had, the sparkle in his eye, the curiosity for the outside world, and appreciating things, and concern for the future.
Well, he was different than most people you'd run across. I think he was. He was an interesting character, though. I liked him, and I'm going to miss him. Yeah.
And you miss him today?
Sure. Yeah, it was always a nice day to go out and see Kitchener, you know. If he had to do it all over again, would he do the same thing? And I think his answer would be yes. Very few people in this world would attempt to live like that. But I'm sure that was the way Willard wanted to live his life. Yeah.
Now for 60-odd years he roamed around the woods near Earl Town. From a young lad to a very old soul. You see, Willard's mother's name must have been Nature. And she took him in and she made sure that the fish, they'd always bite and the snares were always full. Still the years on the Hermit took their toll. And just like some old dog who knew it was time to die, Willard went to the woods without saying goodbye. You know, I didn't reckon they'd ever find that old man. Kinda reminds you of that old saying, you make your bed, well, you gotta lay in it. As for Willard, he made his bed many, many moons ago. Now all that's left is footprints in the snow.
I would say some of my fondest memories when they all used to come, the whole family, to the house and play music. My uncle played and we'd all come in an evening with music. So I love music.
It was sad, and yet he realized that he'd led a long life. He'd lived it the way he wanted to. He had obviously appealed to and affected a lot of people in a very indirect way in terms of not meaning to, but people were inspired, people enjoyed the time with them. He was an institution in his own way without trying to be.
Did you ever see his son Leroy?
Yeah, at the funeral. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we were at the funeral there, he was sitting in front of me there, and my young fellow and I, Trevor, we're sitting there, and Leo was right. Leo.
Leroy. Yeah.
Yeah, he was sitting in front of me there.
He's
Yeah.
quite a
Looks like him though.
resemblance.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he looks quite a bit like him. Yeah, he lives over Pictou County there, and saws wood, cuts wood, and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
Good fellow. You could see it right in him, eh?
Yeah.
Willard. Oh yeah.
After the death of Willard, Leroy Marshall received a letter from the solicitor to the public trustee stating that he would be invited to undergo a DNA test to establish his relationship with Willard. The reason? The old impoverished hermit, whom so many had helped out over the years, with food and firewood and clothing, died leaving a financial legacy, an undisclosed substantial sum of money that appears to have been inherited from wealthy relatives, perhaps those in the United States. Leroy's friends told us that he was not interested in the money, but he would like to have the DNA test to clear up once and for all that he is in fact Willard's son. All Leroy ever wanted was Willard's acknowledgement and love.
It must be very difficult when your identity is tied to who you think your parents are. One of the great challenges is to, in that situation, find your identity as someone who is unique unto themselves. But I can imagine it must have been a cataclysmic experience for him.
Where are we going? Why am I here? I feel like a prisoner. I smell the fear. Don't think it's right to take a life. I want no part of the war machine. I gotta get off this train. Time to break free from these chains. Gotta get off this train. This train ain't bound for glory. Gotta get off this train. No happy ending to the story. The world has gone insane. I don't wanna kill, and I never will. Gonna jump off this ride and find a place to hide until I die. Whoa, under a peaceful sky. Don't think it's right to take a life. I want no part of the war machine. I gotta get off this train. Time to break free from these chains. Gotta get off this train. I gotta get off this train. I gotta get off this train. I gotta get off, gotta get right off.
I believe that the fascination with the hermit had to do with human interest, simply to know somebody that lived a different lifestyle from almost all of the rest of us, and to get some idea on a one-to-one basis.
I'd go back in a heartbeat.
What'd you like about it?
Peace and quiet. You know, you can do anything you want it. You know, you can go out and scream if you wanted to, and nobody would bother you, right?
One of the questions that keeps coming up is, what have we found out? Have we found out anything different? And I would say, I think it just confirms the multi-dimensional kind of guy that Willard was.
Sorry, as Tim was talking, right? Like here it is. It's like noon. It's like 1 o'clock, and when I hear noises, I'm like, it's like, can you imagine if I lived here?
She's such a city girl.
The mystery of a man that in some people's minds it will never pass away, because he's always there in the woods, in the trails, in the pathways, and we certainly don't want to forget such an individual.
A yarn unfolds and a story is told about the Hermit of Gully Lake.
Will the world leaders ever sit together and work towards peace on earth? When will the brotherhood and the motherhood realize that we are all one family and the earth is our neighborhood?
I do too. I believe in miracles. I believe in miracles.
Will there ever be an end to war? Will there ever be an end to greed? Will there ever be an end to fear? Will there ever be an end to need to fight?
I believe in miracles.
Will there ever be an end to hate? Will there always be a want for more? Will there ever be a time on earth when no one plays the game of war?
I believe in miracles.
If we can't work things out, how can we expect our children and their children to treat each other with respect and as equals, sharing the same earth, sun, stars, and moon?
Most wonderful thing about miracles is it sometimes happen. Yeah. You think it's true? I believe in miracles.
Somewhere God is weeping because we have failed the test. We must believe in miracles. It's all that we have left. All that we have left.
I believe in miracles. I believe in miracles. I believe in miracles.
And so our story begins on a troop train as it steams closer to its final destination.
Where are we going? Why am I here? I feel like a prisoner. I smell the fear. Don't think it's right to take a life. I want no part of the war machine. I gotta get off this train. Time to break free from these chains. Gotta get off this train. This train ain't bound for glory. Gotta get off this train. No happy ending to the story. The world has gone insane. I don't wanna kill, and I never will. Gonna jump off this ride.
There was lots of hermits, other hermits around the country, but I've never heard of anyone that lived the way this guy.
And you went off to war. And you went overseas to the Second World War?
I did, but he just left. They called him up from military stuff, but he stayed about a week, ran away.
He was a very honest man. Yeah.
He didn't like killing people, so he used to say that. I think he was scared himself.
And what did you think about him not going to war and staying behind?
It's quite a few decisions in my place.
Of the 38,500 men conscripted,
hearing of him, and that was about 25 years ago.
Any other thoughts about Willard?
He could live on almost nothing.
Gully Lake encompasses a huge area, 4,000 acres. We can have beautiful weather in the
So probably buried him right there. And he's what he said. He said, "Hell without a fire on." I went, "Yeah." I just kind of like, "Yeah."
One fall.
he could play well.
He's one of the best violins players. He could play anything. He could guitar. He could make it.
Everything in there. His stove was in very poor condition, even when I went out there in the late 70s.
Yeah, that old stove seen its better days, didn't it?
Oh yeah, it's just a tin.
Yeah. Well, kept you warm for a lot of years.
And after
X handles, and they were pretty crude sometimes. I was in there once with a lady from Truro, and she bought an X handle from him and gave him a sourdough, you know. And you know what he'd do with the flour? He added that to the sourdough. And how he cooked that on his stove, I don't know. If he put
Why do you think Willard liked Gully Lake so much?
He liked to be alone.
Oh, okay.
He only had too many visitors.
There's a lot of tourists comes here, you know, and you don't know them, some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it ain't too bad.
Oh, yeah.
Like the old fellow says, as soon as smoking this one than the next.
Yeah.
Coming back to visit with him?
No, he wasn't supposed to go with anybody. He was kind of his own family.
Yeah,
Well, they're not really eels. They told everyone they're eels, but it's actually moose meat dry.
Oh, it's moose meat.
That's what it is.
Long time. So Dr. C asked him what education he had. He said, maybe grade 8. He wasn't sure. Yeah. So he got him to write a sentence. What do you want me to write? He said, you write anything you want to write. So he wrote down, this old world is one contrary place.
Wow.
That's what he wrote.
Yeah, just
American-born parents.
I don't regret going back, not once.
The cabin was completely furnished, single bed with warm blankets in the loft, table and chairs, Chesterfield and chair.
The buildup of creosote and such. When you think about what this structure was built out of, the amount of dry rot in the wood, and just incredibly.
Did they come to you first when he went missing?
They came because they accused us of taking him and hiding him.
Oh,
did they really?
Are you serious?
Oh, yes.
On June 27, 2004, they found the remains of Willard's body. A birth certificate and other items found confirmed Willard's identity.
Appealed to and affected a lot of people in a very indirect way in terms of not meaning to, but people were inspired, people enjoyed the time with them. He was an institution in his own way without trying to be.
Where are we going? Why am I here? I feel like a prisoner. I smell the fear. Don't think it's right to take a life. I want no part of the war machine. I gotta get on this train. Time to break free from these chains. Gotta get on this train. This train ain't bound for glory. Gotta get off this train. No happy ending to the story. The world has gone insane. I don't wanna kill, and I never will. Gonna jump off this ride and find a place to hide until I die. Whoa, under a peaceful sky. Don't think it's right to take a life. I want no part of the war machine. I gotta get off this train. Time to break free from these chains. Gotta get off this train. I gotta get off this train. I gotta get off this train. I gotta get off, gotta get right off.
I believe that the fascination with the hermit had to do with human interest, simply to know somebody that lived a different lifestyle from almost all of the rest of us, and to get some idea on a one-to-one basis.
I'd go back in a heartbeat.
What'd you like about it?
Peace and quiet. You know, you can do anything you want it. You know, you can go out and scream if you wanted to, and nobody would bother you, right?
One of the questions that keeps coming up is, what have we found out? Have we found out anything different? And I would say, I think it just confirms the multi-dimensional kind of guy that Willard was.
Sorry, as Tim was talking, right? Like, here it is. It's like noon. It's like 1 o'clock, and when I hear noises, I'm like, it's like, can you imagine if I lived here?
She's such a city girl.
The mystery of a man that in some people's minds it will never pass away, because he's always there in the woods, in the trails, in the pathways, and we certainly don't want to forget such an individual.
A yarn unfolds and a story is told about the Hermit of Gully Lake.